electricity, yeah, you can all thank me. Took some lightning, a kite, and a fat brass key. Now they're putting up streetlights in gay Perry. You're welcome from our young nation. I'm the only American the French want to see. They call me a genius, I can't disagree. They have guns, they have funds, they can set us free. Invest in my reputation. And do you know who the fuck I am? Yeah, do you know who the fuck I am? Do you know who the fuck I am? I am Poor Richard's Almanac riding Benjamin fucking Franklin. I said early to bed, bitches, early to rise. They make a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Soldiers are fighting for freedom, and they have no supplies. So diplomacy happens at night. John Adams debates at the gates of Versailles. He whines and parades and awaits a reply. As I stay up late with a succulent breast or a thigh. Alright, diplomacy happens at night. And do you know who the fuck I am? Yeah, do you know who the fuck I am? Do you know who the fuck I am? I am 76 and I'll still kick your ass fucking Franklin. One pain that lingers, a hitch in my stride, is my son back at home who I could not guide, who sits all alone in a prison cell on the wrong side, stands against our young nation. So I play my ambassador part with pride. I am known in the world, and the world is wide. To my children, my sins may be magnified, but I do it all again, no hesitation. And do you know who the fuck I am? Yeah, do you know who the fuck I am? Do you know who the fuck I am? I am Poor Richard's Almanac riding Benjamin fucking Franklin. Who the fuck I am? Who the fuck I am? I am Poor Richard's Almanac riding polymath, bifocal wearing, harp glass, harmonica playing Benjamin fucking Franklin.
Said you had your reasons. You needed a breath just to clear your lungs. The seasons change. How you have changed. Couldn't fight those demons. How they crept inside and filled you up. Gave you all those reasons to run away. And I'm bursting at the seams. So I let it all out that night. Couldn't hold it in any longer. I'll admit I was trying to pick a fight. See the faintest sparkle. And now we've got one chance to make it. We've got one chance to make this right. So put your broken heart in my hands. I'll bring you back to life. Bring you back to life. Come tomorrow when you've made your mind up and swallowed your pride. We can follow plans we've been making pick a fight. See the finish sparkle, and now we've got one chance to make it. We've got one chance to make this right. So put your broken heart of mine. I'll bring you back to life. 'Cause you're falling out of reach, and I'm bursting at the seams. Can't bring you back to me, back to me. Couldn't stop those demons, how they crept inside and filled you up. Gave you all those reasons to run away. So I let it all out that night. Couldn't hold it in any longer. I'll admit I was trying to pick a fight. See the finish.
Good.
Nice.
Frankly, I'm here because Maria said there was a D&D server open, and I figured, screw it, I'll see if I can get in on this. But yeah, I'm Sib. Hi, hello. Because I know this is going to be the bane of everyone ever on the server. It's pronounced Sibir.
No,
I guess
All right,
it's-
cool. I've been pronouncing it wrong this entire time. Just no, my man. Just
know-
gonna stick with Sib.
when I
Yeah, just
definitely,
because,
so I was definitely muted at the start for one. So
Nice, hot.
once again, I asked Sabir to introduce himself. Sibir, whatever you want to call it. But the point is, when you ask when you say his name like that, you have to say it with confidence, right? Like if you're gonna be wrong, you have to be confidently wrong.
that's true.
Like this is all wrong, but I'm going for it.
Exactly.
Let's
So-
just go with Sib. Everyone does that anyway.
One more
Alright.
time, just the full name one more time, so we all can try it.
It's Sibir.
It's Sibir.
Psionic beer. Like psionic beer.
I was gonna. Yeah, you know what? Let's go with that.
Alright, Mr.
And
Psionic
then, let's make sure. A few people are having trouble hearing. Let us know what you can and cannot hear. Looks everything's good over here. Brush Bandit gasping at the pronunciation being wrong. We see you guys
Yep,
in
same.
chat.
All right, everybody's good. All right.
Ninja Bob, Brush Bandit, your boys of, a few of you in chat. Thank you for stopping by to the Planar Podcast. And I have my two lovely hosts joining me along with our guests. If you guys could introduce yourself, Crook. How are you, man?
Gowan put me on the spot. I'm good. I'm in a garage. Shit's good. You know?
Nice, cool.
Yeah. Got follows on again. So we're gonna disable follows so guitar riffs don't start playing again.
Freaking
Why
Baka.
do you do this?
Every time, you know, it's just an amateur podcast, amateur hour over here.
Very much. We're not a professional show, guys, as you can tell.
No. Yeah.
And then
I'm
Evie.
Evie. I play Pidge and Sophie on the server, and I'm a helper as well.
And then
Oh yeah, I am those things too.
Yeah, you are. Except you're not Pidge or Sophie. You're just an Avash.
I am just an Avash. Right. The sexiest person on the server.
That's
then
debatable.
It's not a debate, but
It's
Top-
not a debate. Everybody knows.
top 203 at least.
Oh yeah, we made it over 200 on the server, by the way.
So
Congrats,
congrats to
everybody.
everyone
We
who's
did
been a
it.
part of that. You know, that's a good achievement. You know, server growth is a good sign that you have a healthy community. People stick around when you have a lot of fun. So, and of course, I am Gavin. I play Anna London in chat or in the server. Owner of Serendipity. Not too much more important on that. quickly becoming the lowest level out of the people who play the game weekly. And as I mentioned before, you are watching the Planar Podcast. So, for those of you who are just watching, just randomly browsing on Twitch, decided to watch just to support some D&D stuff, we're not playing D&D tonight, first off. But if you'd like to play D&D, boy, do we have the server for you. Crook, tell them all about it.
Alright, so listen up, folks. The Planar Podcast is a podcast that we do for Planar Marches, the D&D Discord server. That is an interesting take on a normal West Marches server, but instead of like the whole exploration deal, it's mostly just a hub where you can do quests and play D&D as a certain character based in the city of Sigil, which is kind of like a whole center of the multiverse type deal going on. So you can just kind of be from anywhere. Eberron, other fiction, if you can twist it well enough to be clever and stuff, it's nice.
You can even be from Earth, like Sid is.
Like a quarter of our characters.
Like a quarter of
A quarter of our characters are English speakers.
Not quite the same Earths, though.
That's true.
Not the same Earths at all.
And we'll get to
as
that,
in-
actually. Because
Anna is from an Earth that fucking just got rid of English entirely, and then Sid is from post-apocalyptic Earth.
Partially.
Partially. It's still going on or something.
and
I'll get to that.
we're going to get into a lot more detail about that, because this episode, a large theme of this episode, is going to be flavor customization and just what your character's place is in the multiverse that makes sense to what you want to do, but also playing fair with everyone else with the rules of 5th edition. So a few people can only hear me in my left ear, apparently. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just whispering in your left ear, ASMR. So that's it for the basic introduction. There's a few things we want to talk about before we really delve into what we want to talk to with our guest, Cybir. First off, we want to sort of highlight a few recent quests of interest. Now, I believe that Crook and Evie, you both were mentioning something run by Toothless.
Yeah, his Bloodborne themed quests.
Tooth is the kind of person who will find inspiration in something and will like feed into that and create something based off of it. Like recently, he did a pickup game based on Jungle Book, which is super neat, and then I helped him fill the world with flavor of that and stuff. And his current quest line that he's got going on is all based on like the Bloodborne theme of just that whole like Victorian kind of dark and I don't know, weird fantasy type deal. It's really interesting stuff. And he's done this before with like running Dark Souls and another server and just tons of stuff like that. It was really interesting. Definitely go check him out because he makes the thing about Tooth and Bloodborne that's perfect is that Tooth likes to make bosses, and the highlight of Bloodborne and all the Souls-like games is bosses. So it's a really good mesh. So definitely check those out.
Yeah. There was also a player request done by Ro. It's called "If you die in D, you die." If you die in D&D, you die in real life, which is where everybody as their D&D characters will learn how to play D&D in order.
So I guess Ro can elaborate further on that, but it's just D&D in D&D, right? So I know that a lot of people joke about like Office and Bossy is like just a direct inverse, but is it literally D&D?
I think that's the plan. Achilles is the DM for that one, and he's the one that's going to be doing basically all of the planning for that. But basically, yeah, we're just being D&D nerds as our D&D characters.
So I'm reading the post right now. The game is called Death and Dungeons? No.
It's in the player request. It's if you die in D&D, you die in real life. AKA the gang sits down and plays D&D and D&D. Which is pretty hilarious.
It says this time his travels let their dimensions have likely driven him mad, trapping the bravest of fighters in a game of death dungeons. So, yeah.
Nice.
There you go.
Okay, well, are any of you in that quest?
Pidge is signed up. So I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, I'm not in it because, well, I don't know when the time is, so I don't know. I can really risk it in my
Yeah.
current situation, but um, I'm definitely excited to see this sort of like tongue-in-cheek kind of game happen because it just seems really silly.
I mean, a setting like this, you know, it's going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have, like like you said, a quarter of the population of our servers from Earth, so
Absolutely.
Thank you, Schizo, for the cheer, for the bits. So I guess this is kind of like a personal server programming note, but I did get affiliate 2 days ago.
Nice.
So
Hot.
if you have
Nut, dude.
for real, you know what, and and I'll spoil it to everyone who's watching right now, but I get one global emote because I'm an affiliate.
Nice.
So
Hot.
what's our favorite emote on the server, kids?
Nut.
And
Obviously.
so
go.
I'm working with the talented artist Mac in our server, and we're trying to make Gavin not a thing. We'll see where that goes.
Oh boy.
But if you have, I mean, I'll be selfish. If you have Amazon Prime, you've got Twitch Prime. If you have Twitch Prime, and you're not using it, I got a perfect place for you to use it. But regardless, in podcasts, no notifications, no alerts. But so we've got the Bloodborne theme quest from Tooth. We've got the Dungeons and Dragons quest coming up. It's another quest that's coming up. And then one more current event we'd like to touch on. Ave, Crook, and Evie, you guys are introducing an event pretty quickly. I don't know how many details you have on that, but if you'd like to spoil it a little bit, go for it.
It's the Devils of Sigil arc, which basically, it's the short name of that is the Three Devils, and we essentially have exactly as it sounds, the Three Devils, and we bring them out during our games. We are not entirely sure on exactly when we're going to start dropping hints of those, or like when exactly we're going to have those be really prominent in the server. But the essential idea is that each one of us, Avon, Crook, and me, get our own devil, and we're just kind of taking sides, I suppose, meeting up with a bunch of people. And I'm really curious to see how far we can go without people realizing that this is, in fact, a devil that they're talking to, which makes everybody a lot more suspicious in all of our upcoming games.
Craig, anything you'd like to add to that?
I'm just really excited because there's a lot of there'll be a lot of banter between us, like out of character, because the whole idea is like them opposing each other, kind of.
Yeah.
So if people on Planar Marches want to be a part of this Devils of Sigil arc, what should they know? What's the best times to keep an eye on? What exactly is the format of it?
I don't think we've gotten that far yet. I think we've barely even gotten past just like the actual creation of the devils. We're still working on that as well, just deciding what we're going to use to make them actually commendable and fightable creatures, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if we absolutely start on that, it's definitely going to be on DM Quest posting.
And you know what? That's something to note for you DMs who are watching right now. You guys watch the rerun, the VOD, watching live, what have you. There is a channel for collaborative quest building, so I'd personally like to see that used a little bit more. There's one thing about Planar Marches is how do you feel like you're part of a larger community, and collaborative quest crafting, larger quests, more impactful quests are a part of that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah.
It's nice to in any D&D game, it's nice to impact something in the world, and then to go back on it in character and notice, like, oh hey, I made a difference here. And usually that's only attainable through like returning to someone a specific DM's quest. You know what I mean? Like Raiden with his Verdankai, like we mentioned in the last episode. But it'd be super cool to see that whole influence kind of affect other people's games as well. You know?
So that's a quick note on some quest of interest. Keep an eye out for Tooth's Bloodborne themed quest. Or actually just really any... Tooth has a lot of inspired quests that he likes doing.
Oh,
And
yeah. He's
he
really good at
pretty much
pumping them out.
nails it, right? If you're a fan of this series and he hints that this is going to be kind of like Bloodborne and you love Bloodborne, jump on the quest. It's going to feel like Bloodborne. Devils of Sigil coming up. And of course, apparently we have some meta quests coming up. I'm sure that with Achilles DMing that, we're going to see maybe a small trend of more out of the ballpark meta, like fun quests like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, with that out of the way, some basic housekeeping on the server. We'd like to go ahead and delve a little deeper into why we brought Sibir
Fucking nailed it, dude.
here on...
Good enough.
You know what? I tried as hard as I can.
Look, listen, for me, you get one syllable. It's just Sib, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Listen,
One-
Hey, that
more
works.
than one, it's too
That's what
much.
everyone does anyway.
Maybe I'll like pull a Hob and I'll just call you sibling. I don't know.
Sibling.
Sibling.
So one thing we'd like to do is when we invite guests, we like to invite a diverse set of guests to the show. That's one big goal. Is we don't want to continuously invite, admin, mods, DMs. We want to interview everyone, people who have not been on the server as long, new players, people who are only players, and people who focus on one or two things really, really well that we want to highlight. And so, Sibir, you have a very unique take on how you play your character. You are only a player right now. I don't know if you have any DM aspirations, but...
I have something in mind, yeah, that's out in the future.
Noted. Why don't you introduce yourself again? A little bit more detail this time. Who are you? How did you get into D&D? And what are the whys, hows, and whats about your character?
All right. Well, we got the name kind of down by now, I'd hope. But like I said, I pretty much just followed Maria here when she mentioned there was a server up and running. Because I came from for all of you familiar with Rooster Teeth, there was a Ruby RP sort of thing that we did on Reddit that I was a part of for quite a while. Anyway, I came in from there. I am actually fairly new to 5e and D&D as a general setup. I've done RP stuff for I don't want to say very long time, but for around 7 years now. I'm still fairly new to the system. Hopefully, guessing I'm picking things up kind of well. But
No,
that's up
we
for-
invite
It's not
anyone.
that complicated.
We invite
Yeah.
anyone we want to this podcast. You don't
I
know
mean,
that
you
to
say
be
it's not that complicated. I have done some fairly stupid things in my day. I don't know how bright of a person I can be at times. But I'm here now. I currently play Anatoly, everyone's favorite crazy uncle, with his pet robot bird, Glaza. And like I mentioned earlier, when Gavin mentioned, I kind of have something that I'm planning as a sort of DM thing, but like I said, I'm still new to these things. That is well out in the future. Hoping it's going to be pretty fun. One or two people may have heard the general gist of the idea, but it'll come up eventually. Let me just leave it that.
Nice.
So obviously you've got with Anatoly, you have plenty of experience role playing. Maybe not as much in tabletop, but usually playing at tabletop gives you more freedom because you know exactly what your capabilities are. What have you not been able to bring up that you really want to? What should we really know about Anatoly that you just haven't had the chance to present yet?
Honestly, I've kind of skipped over a few things. Well, maybe not skipped over, but I have not spent as much time doing some of the in-server RP things as I probably should have by level 8. so there are a few things with this whole setup that have just not quite gotten out, and with the whole thing that we'll be getting to later, this and the whole little post-apocalyptic thing mentioned. Basically, the whole gist for him is I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Roadside Picnic novel or the series of Stalker games that were loosely based on it. But for those of you who are, Anatolia is kind of based off of an Earth where that was a thing. So to break it down in the Cliff Notes thing, guy is born to the USSR, winds up going through school. He's a mechanical engineer, and some really, really weird shit starts to happen where the entire region he's in just goes from, normal to, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic because that's a bit too broad, but those of you who are familiar with the series that I mentioned will have an idea. Basically, things start to get weird. Bunch of, for lack of a better word, anomalies start to pop up. People start to change. Things that should not happen start happening. And long story short, he basically falls through one of those things and winds up wandering around different worlds for about 17 years. Occasionally manages to pop back in, but he is from an Earth where weird shit happened. And kind of did not bode well for him. If you are familiar with the book, you will know that those things can change a person, and that was the sort of inspiration that was going on with him no longer being an actual human, because you will note that he is from Russia. He is a tiefling. These things do not normally mix.
No,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
I
just,
tieflings all the time. Fucking.
Oh, yeah.
So this version of Earth, one last time, just to clarify, tieflings, elves, dwarves are not native to that.
They are not native,
It's a side
no.
effect of his travels.
That it's partially a side effect of his travels, partially a side effect of the strange shit TM that started happening. So he is not alone in the people that have been changed per se by that, but he is one of the few that did manage to wind up in Sigil. There is a lot more to that I am hoping to get into more in character, but I will have to deal with that as things go on.
So I have to ask, I don't know how well Crook or Evie are going to follow this conversation, but you mentioned you came from a Ruby forum.
Yeah, it's actually a subreddit.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So so was that like your main place where you were role playing for a while, and then you came to here?
For a while, yeah. I'm
So-
not the only person here. I'm not the only person here who's from that. There are a few others. You know who you are.
Belka.
Before that, I did some other things in other groups. I actually spent a longer time than I want to admit on, I don't know if any of you have ever played StarCraft, but StarCraft 2 had an arcade mode where it was like a custom RP style game. It was weird as shit.
Cortex,
And
I think?
yep, Cortex.
Yeah.
It was weird as shit. Weird as shit. I spent way too much time on it, and that's kind of partially what got me into things. Though I did do a little bit of stuff before that. That and the Ruby thing is the majority of what I've done up until this point, which
So I've
has
gotta-
been a total of like 6 years from
I
now.
just got to ask, like, coming from Ruby to D&D, right? So the entire point of Ruby is rule of cool. You're trying to do as much cool action movie oriented stuff as possible.
We
What's
definitely
it like
have a
going
lot
from-
of that. Yeah.
Because you're going from an atmosphere like that, where if you will it to happen, it happens, to a relatively tame setting in D&D, right? You're swinging your blade 2 times in 6 seconds, and you're adhering to all of these rules as ordained by the book. How is that transition coming along?
It's not been as. It's actually been a bit in the opposite direction. Where I'm coming from, we had a system that was loosely based off of White Wolf. and we basically just modified it and adapted it for our own purposes. And one of the things there that kind of threw me for a loop when I showed up here is we had a whole like character approval process. You look at these sheets before people can use them. You got a well thought out backstory. You got balanced numbers from. We had pretty much a point by setup. And everyone goes in, they design their own weapons. You get your own semblance, which for people unfamiliar with it is kind of like your personal superpower. And the way we had that was fairly well run. We had a sort of action economy. We had a sort of rolling system. Nothing like the D20 setup you'd see in D&D, but I feel like when I first showed up here, I sort of got the, wait, I don't have to get these things approved. We just post it in and that's it. That's done. Kind of threw me for a loop. So it's going from something where everything is sort of, you would think, rule of cool type setup to something like this. I don't think it was that much of a transition, to be honest. Yeah, the systems are different, the settings are different, but honestly, you could grab any one of the characters that were present there, slap a few numbers around, and basically port it over to here more or less intact. The numbers would be all different, the attacks would be all different. You'd be missing the semblance and stuff like that, unless you go for like spellcasters and what have you. But especially with Sigil being Sigil, you can have someone who actually is from Remnant, the world in the setup. But yeah, overall, it wasn't actually that big of a change. It was just, okay, this is what I'm doing now, I suppose. And to be honest, I haven't been active there in quite a while.
Right.
Oh, nice.
I think we've got a pretty good idea on where you come from, what your experiences are, and kind of where Anatoly's from. I want to go ahead and move on to the main topic of the night, which we teased earlier, and that is flavor and customization. Because I think everyone here has dabbled in it, at least, whether you've done it on your character or as a quest giver DM. But this is the TLDR of this chat will be, why are there so many guns in Sigil, and why do they hurt the same amount as a hand crossbow bolt?
Yeah, that's
It's because it is a hand crossbow.
Right.
pretty much, yeah.
So let me sort of frame this really quick, and then I'm gonna get your individual and group thoughts about it. So when we talk about flavor and customization, it's the idea that, and this server emphasizes it, many servers do not. This is one of the coolest part about Planar Marches. Because you're in a world that has infinite possibilities, your character can have an infinite amount of backgrounds. Right? So you've got a gunsmith from Earth, you've got a street samurai from Shadowrun, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, everyone has to adhere to the fact that you're playing D&D 5e. And when you make your starting character, you have to have this, you have a choice between these weapons. And so some people would like to say, Razak is one of the best examples of this. One of the first characters where it's really emphasized on is Razak has a hand crossbow, but it is reflavored as a Glock.
Yeah, that's actually changed as of, I think about 2 weeks ago now. He's got a new setup. I'm not going to go into details for that, but it's a different kind of real gun now.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the real gun.
It's
Maxim
Maxim 9.
He flavored that whole process as just getting it upgraded from a Glock, which is just a normal hand crossbow, to a +2 hand crossbow, which is the upgraded weapon, or the new.
Yeah, he already had both, so it wasn't, buying anything special. It was just, well, we're getting rid of this old thing that we had, and the thing that we currently have, that we currently use, well, we're changing what that is.
Yeah.
And so just to visit back, what I was trying to say was, the entire one huge point about the server is your roleplay takes precedence a lot of times over the specifics in the book. You have to adhere to the rules of the book, but if you want a gun that has the same stats as a hand crossbow, more often than not, you get the gun. If your background requires this, you have to own this type of house for your background to work. It doesn't really mechanically affect anything, and more often than not, we give it to you, right?
Yeah.
So the big thing I want to talk to you guys about is how do you guys feel about the way all of it interacts together, and what are ways people can what are the best ways to flavor your character while keeping it respectful to other characters? So, for instance, if 75% of the server decides they would rather have a gun than a hand crossbow, what's the most respectful way to handle that, right?
That's absolutely fine to do. I feel like the only real reason that we would ever say no to something is if you're trying to create something that doesn't already exist. So things like we had a character who wanted a katana, and he was like, here's all the stats that it would be. And we were like, why don't you just take that katana and make it into a great sword? And then you can have a katana.
Or like a long sword.
Or like a long sword, yeah, because then you're not breaking the rules or anything. Because we do have very specific rules that say we take things that are specifically Wizards of the Coast published materials. But somebody earlier in the week asked if they could play like a straight up orc and just use the half orc stacks, and we were like, yeah, absolutely, do that. That would be awesome. I think he ended up changing his mind on that, which was kind of a bummer. But yeah, and we have just like the idea that you can take something and then put it and just flavor it as something else that already exists is kind of the baseline. So with Raz and his Glock, it was something that already existed, the hand crossbow. And when he wanted to shoot twice per round, he got the crossbow expert feat, which allowed him to do that, which was pretty sweet. And I think it's he's one of the few fighters that actually got a crossbow and then stuck with it. Probably.
Crossbows are legit though. Like
yeah, they are.
Around, you know, but yeah.
Mhm. I don't think that ever happens.
Yeah.
I mean, there were Fragger specifically kind of brought it up that it was like, well, why are there guns and cell phones in D&D? And we were like, because there are already things that already exist. The cell phones being sending stones, and that's basically how they function. It's not like we're taking something and then changing it entirely.
I think I
it's
might
something that already existed.
I think I might have double muted myself. The original question was, yeah, I like unmuted and I like muted myself in the same press, I guess. I don't know. The original question is, what do you do for people who want to play traditional 5e, swords, bows, magic, in a world where more and more players want to play highly technological characters? And then Evie was
they still
question.
exist. It's essentially like nothing has changed. The only difference is instead of a hand crossbow, they just call it a Glock. It's still a hand crossbow, but it's like the difference between somebody offering an orange and saying, "Oh well, it's not an orange; it's tangerine." It's still an orange. It's the basic setup of the orange. It's just, they're taking something new from it and making something that fits their character. It's not something that would actually be out of place in Sigil. It's a multi-universe hub, so you will come across people that have guns, and you will come across people who have bows and arrows, like Pidge and Rez, who has a gun, and then Pidge has a bow and arrow. Basically, the only flavoring that Pidge has on his thing is that when he got it upgraded to a +2, he in roleplay went back to his dad to go like reforge the entire thing and then add feathers onto it. So that was pretty much it. But it's essentially the same thing as Raz getting a +2 crossbow, because yeah, it acts exactly the same. We're not changing any actual mechanics. We're not saying, oh, this Glock also has 6 shots in it, because that's how much a Glock would actually carry in real life. It's still hand crossbow.
Right. And another thing I think some people would take issue with that is just the sheer juxtaposition. Like you've got, let's call it a half elf. Call it a half elf wizard or what have you. Really, just pick anything. Casting spells left and right, all these fancy magical items, and then right next to him, you've got, say, some guy who picked up a heavy crossbow and he's flavored it as, a Mossberg pump shotgun. Guy's got, say, he has chainmail or whatever, and he's flavored as like a Kevlar vest. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there would be some people saying, okay, these two, it makes no sense having them be together. Why would you possibly even consider this? You would think one of them is vastly more powerful than the other. Again, even though it's just the same thing, reskinned. And partially to that, I don't know if anyone actually, has this concern, but it's something I have heard of. I don't really, especially in a setting like Sigil, where it makes perfect sense, it's the center of all possible multiverses. I'm kind of personally surprised that there aren't more futuristic setup things, because you would imagine, you've got all these worlds where people are just barely scraping by. You get cholera and die versus a bunch of worlds where someone shows up and they've got a flying car.
I definitely think there's just to sort of interrupt you for a moment, I definitely think there's some amount of lampshading we do, because if this were a more realistic setting, it would be an arms race. Everyone you discover one playing with guns, and then all of a sudden you've got
absolutely
tens of thousands of guns funneling into Sigil, right?
Yeah, and there are a bunch of ways that you could easily just, lampshade that or just hand wave it away. Like, some of these more modern settings don't have the same availability of connections to Sigil, or
There's
whatever you want to say.
A dozen portals at any given time for a plane that has more technology than Faerun.
Yeah, I mean, just it is how it is. But one of the things I do want to say with that is there are a lot of things in fiction that you'll see where the two, I'll just keep it simple for this and just say magic and tech do intertwine. I mean, you've got things, for instance, you do have things like Shadowrun, but you also have, if you're looking at, say, books, you have the Dresden Files, you've got Charles Strauss's Laundry series, there's something called the Shadow Ops series, where you've got, modern guys, modern equipment, say a wizard holding a Glock, or a guy who can summon portals who's flying a helicopter. In some ways, personally, I think that can be pretty neat. Some people, I mean, you're open to your own opinion, but like stuff like that doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. If you do think it should be, go fine by you. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't have to have that mutually exclusive sort of juxtaposition. There are ways where you can make it be pretty neat. And again, not everything has that whole setup where, why would I even bother taking this crossbow when I could just take a crossbow and flavor it as a rifle? Well, maybe your character's in a setting where they're more familiar with the crossbow. That's something that you're perfectly allowed to do. I know people who are much more comfortable holding just a compound bow than they would be holding, say, a shotgun in any circumstance. It's your character. You can choose what they would rather have. And if it's the same sort of thing reskinned, then you're not losing out on something. It's not, if I don't flavor it this crossbow as a shotgun, I lose out on an extra D6 of damage I can roll. No, it's the same thing. It's just your character's preference for it.
Yeah, basically.
Crook, do you have anything to add? So Avash is a pretty, typical, could be in any traditional D&D setting sort of guy, right?
I would say so.
Unless there's some hidden backstory we don't know about where he's actually a robot in disguise. But
he is a weeaboo.
He is actually a weeaboo, but that's because Avash was born in Sigil, which again, multiverse type thing. So he's experienced all of these things, and that's kind of how I like to have him, as to just be that one person who is like, you show him like, oh yeah, this is a computer. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Yeah, some guy like down the street was just like hoarding these types of things, and he had all these fucking chips everywhere. I don't know what the fuck's up with that guy. Thought it was crazy. He's that kind of person.
Avash is immune to culture shock.
Exactly. And so like, he knows all types of things about, the normal fantasy realms of, Faerun and Eberron and all that. But then he also, he's seen some stuff from Earth, and he's seen some stuff from, like the future earthen type places and all those types of things. So yeah, I guess he is the kind of like versatile, like, yeah, I could just be from anywhere type guy, or I can literally just hang anywhere and be all right type character. Which on his own is kind of like flavoring, but to a lesser degree, I feel.
Okay, so obviously we have reskins in game. A Glock does 1d8. A hand crossbow does 1d8. It changes a bit for roleplay though, doesn't it? So if you're interacting with another character, I mean, I'll tell you straight up, if it were just in RP, I think Anna would rather get hit by a crossbow bolt than a bullet from a Glock.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Even though in game they do the same amount of damage, how do you, it does give your character more leeway in roleplay. Not saying that's a problem, but that is a fact, right?
No,
yeah,
for sure.
and there are some bits where it gets a bit weird, like with Rez, for example. I mean, he's got a suppressed handgun, and he's also got sharpshooter. I can tell you, as a gun guy myself, you are not going to shoot out to 320 feet using any sort of handgun with any sort of remote accuracy. It's just not going to happen. That's why Canadian Mounties just don't use handguns. They use heavier weapons than that. But I mean, you've got that whole setup where, your character may be much more willing to jump in front of a crossbow shot than someone shooting this little cube that blows up, and at the end of it, someone drops to the ground screaming. I mean, given if they know what it was, might change their mind a little bit. But yeah, at the end of the day, it does the exact same thing. But you do get that whole aspect where, like you mentioned earlier, he's shooting a hand crossbow, which is flavored as a Glock. Glocks, you don't have to put in a new bolt every single shot. To some degree, I mean, I know I would go so far as to say if you were really trying to push it, you could go ahead and take a crossbow and flavor it as, oh, this is a automatic rifle of some sort. Every time he fires it, it shoots 2 or 3 rounds that together deal that same damage as a normal crossbow.
Yeah.
Mechanically, it would be the same thing. You would get that extra, I don't want to say extra effect, but you would get that flavor of it being, oh, instead of letting loose one crossbow shot, you've got, 3 or 4 bullets flying down range. And if your shot hits, they all hit, If it misses, they all miss. And go ahead.
So there's that issue where, like, if you don't already know, holding concentration works for every single hit. So if you got a magic missile, you do like fucking 9th level magic missile, that's 1,000,000 con saves they have to make for each magic missile hit, right? And now sure, it's just flavoring, but that's also those points of conflict that flavoring can have with the actual mechanics of the game, where you mechanically got hit by 1 arrow, or by one, well, even then, hey, you technically got hit by a single bolt. But flavor-wise, you've been hit with 3 bullets in a single shot. So it's one of those things where it's like, obviously I roll 1 con save, but it'd make more sense to roll 3. That's 3 bullets.
You as a DM have to put your foot down at that point, right? So you can't let your players say, well, it's flavoring, it's actually 1 hit. Well, no, you reflavored Magic Missile, and Magic Missile requires 3 hits. We don't have to say that, but I'm going to make you roll 3 times.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in some respect, one of the ways I see that is if you're playing, say, like a turn-based game, or actually a lot of games do this. I'm just going to use XCOM, for instance, here, because you guys have probably seen that played at least. You make an attack, it deals a certain amount of damage if it hits. The whole setup for that attack is you fire a burst of ammunition. That burst itself is the attack, and it deals that effect for it. Like you said, with concentration, for every single thing that hits you, you would have to make that check. Depending on how you run that, I don't like the whole 3 bullets being 1 bolt, still being 1 check. That I don't feel like would be too big of an issue. Say you're trying to, because they're all coming in at the same time, you'd be trying to resist, 3 things hitting within a second of each other. It's not much more different than 1 thing hitting at once.
Well, it's kind of spirit of the law versus rule of law, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, this is... I know what you're trying to say, but the game's balanced around magic missile being a good counterbalance to people concentrating. It's an attack that always hits. It's
Right.
an attack that, you're fishing for a low concentration roll to break concentration.
Right.
And no amount. I mean, so I know some DMs will give it to you, right? Okay, so actually, this segues really well into my next point. Flavoring can be disadvantageous at some points.
Oh, absolutely.
A hand crossbow is much quieter than a suppressed pistol, even.
Exactly. I was meaning to actually get into that. Recently, there was a quest I was on where it doesn't exactly work the same, because what I have for Anatoly is actually the Artificer Thunder Cannon, which is an actual D&D thing that is actually very, very loud. But that being very, very loud blew the whole group's cover, and it did not go as planned. But in a similar note, if you do take something like a crossbow and again flavor it as, a handgun or a shotgun or whatever have you, if you want to do that, I think you do definitely have to take that. You have to take the punch to the gut of, okay, this is no longer a it is a very loud bang, and if you're standing next to it, your ears are gonna be ringing. People are gonna know that you shot this thing off. Even though, again, mechanically, it is the exact same thing. If you want to have that flavor bonus and that sort of, as you mentioned earlier, I'd rather take a crossbow bolt than a bullet. You are also going to have to deal with the fact that, in role playing, then, well, congratulations. Now you've alerted everyone in the city block that something is going on.
Okay, so I guess the way I want to sum this all up is, let's say I'm going to throw a very specific situation at you. Kruk, you're the DM of this group. You DM the most games out of all 4 of us.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe tie between us, I don't know. So, Razak is in the middle of a warehouse with his, let me go bring up the meme comic. Make sure I get the name of this right. With his, Mazen, Nagant, or, wait, I don't even know. With his gun. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
Same.
We are not gun people. We are sorry to the 2 gun people in the server right now.
Wait, there's a second one?
I think? Whatever.
I think somewhere.
Raz fires his gun. Okay? Does it break stealth when a hand crossbow wouldn't?
Now here's the thing. Attacking breaks stealth, mechanically anyways.
So you're saying you would reveal even with the hand crossbow? That would make enough noise?
You would
as
reveal
far
with
as
just a
noise
normal
goes.
wooden bow, yeah.
Me, as a DM, I don't plan stuff outside of the immediate area. You know what I mean? So if they're in a warehouse, I'm only thinking of the guys in the warehouse. And if someone gets shot, the weapon isn't the only thing making the noise. You know? Unless you got like a critical hit. If you rolled a crit and it immediately killed the guy, then I'd be like, okay, he probably died without a sound, you know? But
let me rephrase this question.
Then he's fucking screaming.
I'm trying to make this hard for you, right? Just
Yeah, I know.
buy into it, right? You roll with you add a stealth check into it, okay? Let's say that typical DC, you roll a 15 stealth and you fire your crossbow in a way that you select the line just right, that barely makes any noise, kills a guy who's not being watched, right? Do you do a DC 15 stealth check for the crossbow and then that same DC 15 check for the Glock? Or would you increase that DC if they're trying to take a silenced shot?
I honestly couldn't answer that. because
I feel like it's more up to the DM in that
Yeah.
case.
because you can have them roll like more. You can have them roll more things, like how well are you at hiding the noise of your gun? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, put a pillow in
Right.
front of it, shit like that.
Waiting
Yeah.
for some loud noise to pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are ways that you could do that. Again, I have not done this shit at all yet, but personally, as someone who's been around gunfire, everyone would hear that shit, even if it was suppressed.
Yeah.
Versus, if it was just a regular hand crossbow, no flavoring, you could, hey, did someone hear something? Because crossbows still make a bit of noise, but it's a lot easier to conceal that smacking of a bowstring than it is
It's
to
a loud twang on a crossbow.
Yeah, you're dealing with a loud twang versus literally an explosion and a sonic boom.
What
So I mean, it's not like there isn't something to conceal, but it's definitely a lot easier to conceal a crossbow shot than it is a gun. So the easiest thing would just be like, hey, you shot a fucking. That's what you get for shooting a gun in a place without a silencer, idiot.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I'm gonna give you another situation. This one's more an advantageous scenario where you have flavoring, and I have a feeling your answer is gonna be the same thing. But say you're trying to shoot the lock off of a chest, and you have a hand crossbow or a Glock. Would you treat that differently if they said I shoot the lock off? Because with a gun, very obviously you should be able to shoot the lock off, but with a crossbow bolt, not so much. There's not quite enough strength to really pop a lock. Would that be a situation where you say, even with flavoring you can't do it, or because of flavoring you can do it?
Ooh, I hate to be this guy. Most of the time it wouldn't really make a difference. You just destroy the lock to the point where it couldn't be opened.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, let's do it fantasy wise. Let's do it's a fantasy lock.
Fantasy wise, I mean,
it's one of those large.
Yeah, if we're gonna go that far,
It's smelted in a way where it only cracks at the lock hinge.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going that
Five in
far
here.
into the fantasy wise, I mean, I would just say, okay, it has this amount of hit points. If you do that much damage, you could be hitting it you could be stabbing it with the back of a dagger. It
That's
breaks.
usually what you do with those. Because that's how breaking structures works, I believe. It's just they have
Just
hit
break it.
NPCs. So you just fucking hit it, and if you do enough damage, then it's broken.
Hit it with your
So, I mean,
elbow, and if it did enough damage, it would still break.
That's what I kind of thought you guys would say after the first answer. I kind of thought, well, if they're gonna treat that situation like it, then no matter what you shoot it with, it's gonna open if you will to open.
Yeah, well, because the idea for flavoring is for it to leave it as flavor, right? So you want to get as close to, you want both scenarios to have generally the same outcome as possible, as close as possible. Now you can have leeway, of course, but
I'm just gonna have to be just a second. There's something fucking up with my connection, so give me like
cool.
30
Hot.
seconds.
So let's find out how many ways we can say Sibir's name. How many different ways can we slaughter his name before he gets back?
I prefer Sabire.
Sabir, that's a good
Sabire.
one.
I like that too.
Sabire.
Cybe Ray Ray.
Sabire. And then,
Sibire?
as
Sibire?
Cosbones posted in the chat, D&D does embrace a lot of sci-fi stuff. So, arguably, Sigil being the most sci-fi of that, it's a planescape that has a multiverse, everything like that. Everything connects to it. People are often like, oh, well, why is Earth allowed? The answer is because it's always been allowed. It's something that already existed in D&D, and if you wanted to make your own plane where it's like, it's basically just New York City, then you could do that. It would have to be called something else-ish, I think, if you wanted to keep it better.
Here's a good question for you guys. Go ahead, continue. Finish your thought.
But yeah, basically all of these things, like guns and everything, already exist in D&D. There's even in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and we were talking about this kind of as an aside on the DM's side, where we discovered that guns are absolute garbo. As in, if everybody gets a gun, then it's balanced. But if only one person gets a gun, then everybody else is like, well, why can't I do?
Well, that's
like
kind of like one of the
18d6 damage.
that's
Yeah, Um, sorry, I was just fixing something, so I don't know if this is what brought it up, but one of the comments in the Twitch stream.
Yeah, it was Cosmos, yeah. Like, these
Yeah.
things already existed. Like, the Spelljammer ships, the airships, all of these things already
Oh yeah,
existed.
and if you
Yeah.
look in the DMG, you'll see that there is literally antimatter rifle,
There's a
2
firearm
shots,
Yeah.
stage. Yep.
2D. What is
There's
it?
a laser gun
68
in there.
necrotic? Yeah, I mean these things. The game accounts for them. There are systems written into it where this is how you would have a character sort of understand how the hell this thing works. In a
science checks
plain
it.
old D&D setting, they probably would have no idea how any of it works, aside from point, press button, thing in front of you dies. But there are sort of provisions for it.
Yeah,
One-
like, there's already rules that already exist in order to determine whether or not a character would actually know how to use alien technology. And it's basically a series of intelligence checks over a course of time, basically trying to determine if they even know what it is first, and then determine if they can figure out how it works. And those already exist, but we don't actually use those rules most of the time on the server. We just kind of say, if you know somebody who might know what this is, as in, like, somebody finds a smartphone and they go to Raz and he's like, oh yeah, that's a smartphone. Like, that kind of makes it an easier version of that. And
Yeah,
then there's
this
also the
is-
bulletin
this is
board for
Sigil.
that as well. Yeah, this is Sigil. People know what it is.
Someone's
Yeah.
gonna know what it is anyway.
Let me do one last aside on the topic.
Yeah.
So running close to out of time on this one topic, but DMs are responsible for bridging this gap between what's balanced in roleplay and what's balanced in game. Evie mentioned we had this talk earlier in the week in DM discussions. What are ways to give this cool stuff like guns, but also balance it in a way that makes sense for roleplay, the lore of Sigil, and gameplay? I use fingerprint guns. The gun can only this is very D&D-ish. If you set your murder hobos into modern day New York, they are going to come back into Sigil with every pistol they were able to steal. How do you stop them from doing that? And that's a DM's responsibility to sort of patch some of these holes where you're not letting loose a giant plot hole. Nobody likes plot holes in their story, right?
Right, and well, while you might not find many of any firearm in New York, what you did with railguns, for instance, between A, the cost of the ammunition on those being pretty prohibitively expensive if you want to buy a lot of it, and B, they are fingerprint locked, one of which is fingerprint locked to Ray, so you know all she's going to be doing is licking the gun.
Yeah, she likes to look stuff.
Yeah, that's not how you absorb the power of railguns. I'm sorry
You
to break
can't
it
tell
to you,
her
buddy.
that.
I'm sorry to break it to you, buddy. That's
I
not how that
refuse
works.
to let you break this for her.
But like, when you limit it to like 1 or 2 people, and okay, here are the hard limits for it, you're not going to be handing this shit out to anyone whatsoever. Actually, one of the things that if you look at just how artificers work, because I do play gunsmith in this, if you look at some of the things for thunder cannons, for instance, basic thunder cannon, it's a magical firearm of sorts. It deals 2d6 piercing, and when paired with gunsmith levels, you will get that extra, d6s of thunder damage for it. So right now he's level 8. He's got 2d6 piercing plus the 3d6 thunder damage. You only get proficiency in it if you're a gunsmith. You only get that extra damage if you're a gunsmith. And it's sort of a way that it does what you did with locking things into the person who gets it, built into the game itself for the locking it into this particular class that gets it.
Yeah. Because otherwise, 2d6 on a ranged weapon, with the range being really, really long on a thunder cannon.
Oh yeah, the range is 150 and 500.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty good. It's almost a fucking longbow, which is like the longest range.
Yeah. And another thing that it
That's
does
great
for it
sword
is,
as well, so it's like, damn.
yeah, and you've also got to spend that bonus action on your reload every single time. Otherwise, congratulations, buddy, you're not making any attacks.
Yeah, the game balances the weapon out, but in terms of like firearms in like, okay, if I'm a DM and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna go to like I just watched Big Hero 6 recently, so I'm like, yeah, we're gonna go to fucking what the hell is the name of that place? We're going there, right? This session, and they run into some cops, and the cops pull guns on them, and then they, you know, they beat up the cops, so they kill the cops, right? The party is definitely 100% gonna steal those guns and anything they can off these people, because that's just what that's what players do. That's what people do. They wanna have that advantage, and so we're presented with that opportunity. It's up to the DM to realize, hey, I don't want these people to come in with how much damage do freaking handguns do?
1d10 piercing.
San
And you-
Francisco says
for the
crossbones.
automatic handgun, I believe.
Sometimes as a DM, you have to be bullshit about it too. Like, oh, they actually shot their last bullet right before you got them.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of things that you could do. I mean, you could even say, you know, you get this thing, but you only get, you know, 20 shots through it or some arbitrary thing like that before it breaks, and you have no idea how to fix it because you have never seen this thing before in your life. You just know that you pick it up, put your finger on this bit, point it at something you don't like, and whatever you're pointing it at drops.
Or it breaks.
When something breaks, you know, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah. Or like conveniently, out of these, all 20 of these police officers that you killed, they all landed on their guns and they shattered.
Yep.
You know,
Tough
just
luck,
shit
buddy.
like that. You gotta just pull the rug out from under them sometimes and just be like, yeah, no, you're not getting this shit, idiot, because that's broken. But on with the quest.
Final words on flavoring, Evie.
What?
Final thoughts on flavor and customization.
Don't break the game, and you'll be fine. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen so far, people seem to be pretty good about that.
Cyber,
Yeah.
any final thoughts on flavor and customization?
Was that for me? Oh,
No, Cyber.
Ha!
sorry.
Get dunked on,
Yeah.
nerd.
As someone who kind of does this a lot, you have my word, I'll do my best to not break anything.
And
yeah.
Crook.
there's a few more things I want to touch on.
Do
Make
it,
it
nerd.
quick. No, I'm gonna hijack it for a bit. Go ahead.
It's just one thing. It's actually just one thing. Some people have asked about race flavoring, and there's a lot of people who do it already, like Paladin, who's a character I absolutely love, which is C-Star's character, is a Warforged rogue, but he's a Modron. He's playing or a Quadron rather.
Which are there's already an established race dash monster in 5e.
Mm-hmm.
There's that, and they're also very prominent in Planescape books.
Yes.
They basically have their own book, if that makes sense. It was back when second edition was made, back when the Planescape books even existed. That's where all the setting stuff is. Like, there's even entire books on like the NPCs of Sigil. If you're going to look that far back, they have stats and everything, but they're all based for second edition.
So what's your thoughts on reskin races?
So my thoughts on that is like, you can totally do race flavoring or any type of flavoring, so long as that adheres to things in the game. Now, there's other people who've asked like, hey, can I have half elf stats but be a halfling? And that's where I draw the line on that, because halflings are small, and there's no such thing as a 5-foot halfling. I'm sorry. So, yeah, or even 4-foot halfling. I think 4 is the minimum, right, for medium-sized creatures, and I don't think that's so. And then not only that, if you're like this halfling, half-elf thing, you know, there's certain mechanics with the halflings get, especially like the Lightfoot ones where they can like stand inside people's spaces and attack and stuff. All that shit wouldn't make sense if you're also a medium creature by stats. So it's like, if things conflict like that, then it's weird.
Evie, thoughts on reskin races?
It's pretty much exactly like what Crook said. It's basically like, we had that one guy who wanted to be just like a full-blood orc, but have the stats of half orc, and we were like, that's absolutely fine. Go ahead and do that. But he was like, I want to be an orc, but I want to have the stats of a gnome. I would be like, first off, why do you want to play as a gnome? Secondly, no, because gnomes are very small, and orcs are
Yeah.
very large.
Orcs are very,
Very
big.
swole.
It's the disparity.
Very small, very small.
So swole. Sibir, reskin races thoughts.
Yeah, try not to ruin it for everyone else, and you probably won't have a problem.
I personally, I'm fine with it. I also don't like it because it's just confusing. It really does bring, you know, a lot of us are veterans to 5e, Sibir excluded, and it, you know, it gets kind of confusing for newer players, right? Because, oh, you can be a modern? I didn't know that, and there's a lot of material to sort through. That's kind of just, I'll put my final thoughts on flavoring. That generally is how I tend to feel about it. I think if you're flavoring your character, you should be very upfront and explain it, especially to new players. One of the favorite things I think Mac does is on his snippet, when he rolls his Glock, he has in parentheses, hand crossbow. And that alone just clears up a lot of things for a lot of people. No one's asking, oh, why does Raz have a Glock? I want a Glock. It's better than a hand crossbow, isn't it? No, it's not. So don't break the game, and be transparent and open, and accept that people are going to be confused about it, and be ready to explain the confusion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're playing a different set of rules, you have to explain them.
And there's also just with flavor, I mean, keep it within reason. You're not going to have a hand crossbow and reflavor that thing as, you know, a bazooka. Keep it something reasonable.
Yeah. It's got to
Now
be
you
at
can-
least close by, like in that family.
You can be a wizard with a bazooka, and that'd be your fireball. Now that might be
Yeah,
reaching,
that
but I'd
makes
allow
sense.
that.
That,
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's Achilles' character, Paris, who is a warforged, and he is a robot, and he's from the future, and he has no idea what magic even is. But if you go into his character sheet and you look, he's a sorcerer. So it's like the difference between RP and actual mechanical benefits to having everything is the major line. Like Soph in chat brought up, it's like Lim wanting rats. Like, that's totally fine. You can have rat friends as long as they don't do anything. Unless you want to buy a mastiff, and
Well,
then
they
you're
bother
like,
the
oh,
hell out
I
of
have a
everyone
lot
else.
of
rats.
stray dogs. Like, you know, Philippe does. He's like, I have 6 stray dogs, and it's they're just my friends.
But those are technically, that's the awakening conjured animals.
Yeah.
So-
I'm gonna ask
How
one more
lonely
question,
do you have
even
to
though
be?
though I've tried to close this topic like 10 minutes ago. I do
Yeah,
have one more question. If you're trying to do custom flavor, I think you probably want to be more respectful to the roleplay aspect than the game aspect, right? The balancing is law, but being reasonable in roleplay. So, for instance, no one likes that person when you're playing a traditional roleplay forum. No one likes that person who's like, I can teleport, I have 5 blades, and I can catch bullets. And then you're like trying to roleplay alongside, you know, a character who is just walking down the street heading to school.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of the difference between having the mechanical benefits versus just like the flavor benefits. Flavor does not equal mechanics, and we will drive that saying into the ground. You know, like Lim wants to have pet rats that don't do anything, and as long as they don't do anything, that's fine. Raiden was telling me this story of a player that he had that was like, I pull out my greatsword, and also a mouse comes up on my shoulder, and I look over to that mouse, and I'm like, let's do it, Cheddar! And then he just like runs forward, and it's like, all right, cool, you can do that, that's fine.
Fucking cheddar. Yo, that's
Cheddar is
Isn't
an
that
inspiration
adorable?
to us all.
We don't have much time left. I'm going to push us on to our next topic, which is one of my favorite topics, viewer Q&A. Guys, in Twitch chat, ask any questions you would like. We're going to discuss them, either quick answer or at length. We didn't get to every question last time. There was one question I wanted to pull, however. I think it was Ro who asked it, but what was your biggest I want to say, I think we answered this one. Biggest derail as a DM. Did we answer that one last
Yeah,
time?
we already did that one.
There was some question. Mac asked what we thought about the sudden influx of PCs from Earth. I think we kind of
That's fine.
touched
We
on
are,
that.
It's
we touched on it a little bit. People were like, "Oh, why is Earth a thing?" The answer is because it is a thing. It's one of those planes on the prime material that already pre-existed.
Here's the question: what was the biggest thing you've BS'd as a DM?
Oh,
And again,
yeah.
we're taking more questions in Twitch chat if you're still sticking around. Ask us anything. But biggest thing you've BS'd as a DM? I mean, in my early days, I BS'd entire sessions. I would go in with a very loose plan and just react as the players did. I don't know if that counts for an answer, but it's true.
I mean, that's kind of what being a DM is in a lot of ways.
Just
This
ask
is
them all to
being-
roll perception while you brew yourself a cup of coffee.
Oh
Exactly.
yeah, Pull a Maria.
So hang on, can you guys just roll perception real fast? I'm gonna start fucking writing up everything that's in this room. Hang on.
And most of being a DM is trying to come up with stuff on the fly, because you can't possibly plan for everything.
Yeah.
You know, you can't. You can run an entire session and be like, I have a skeleton outline of everything, and I have like, if they meet an NPC, here's all the questions and answers that they might ask, but you will never account for everything. So being a DM is very strong suited towards people who are able to improvise well.
Right, BSing is really the same thing as improvising.
Yeah.
Two sides of the
It's
same
just
coin.
tasteful improvisation. I think, and it wasn't me as a DM, but I love bringing this up as a joke, because Max said like a stupid pun. Raiden pushed him into voice 4, and then kind of as a joke, everybody else was like, "Oh well, I don't want to be with Raiden anyway," and then we just kind of left and went into voice 4, and we were like, "Oh, so we're gonna do a pickup," and then C Star, one of our DMs, he was like, "Oh yeah, we can just all right, so you guys are in an area and there's Tritons," and we were like, oh, we're actually doing, all right, we're actually going, okay.
That's
Soph
amazing.
has
It was
Soph
the
has
greatest.
Soph has a live question. Have you ever played with that guy? And if so, how have you dealt with it? You know what? This is half a D&D question, and the other half a relationship question.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, we're about to become a relationship podcast to answer this question.
That guy, if there's a lot of people who play D&D differently. There was though I haven't really had my own experiences with that, but in my friendship group, when I originally started playing D&D, and this is an actual story, and how it's a reason as to why I don't play female characters. I had this group of teenage boys trying to teach everybody how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, all right, cool. And then I rolled for my character's gender because I'm a nerd. And I was like, yo, I'm just going to roll for this. And then he turned out to be a boy. And then it was like halfway through the first session when I realized that all that the other male characters wanted to do was bang every chick that they saw. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll be here. The actual female in the room. Pretending that I'm okay with this.
So what
And then
did
long
you...
story short,
yeah, go
like
ahead.
years later, Sophie is my first female character.
What did you do at the time? Did you just sort of go along with it and just quit when you had a chance, or?
Yeah, it kind of fizzled out on its own. At the time, I was like, this is weird. I don't know if I'm okay with this. But I was also like, I mean, it's not like I'm not going to ruin anybody else's fun. And then I was like, oh, wait, they might possibly be ruining mine. I think I'm just going to stay in the back for most scenes that involve women.
And there, not to say anyone was doing anything right there, but people have different levels of tolerance, and that's when you're dealing with that guy situation. Some people don't see them as that guy, but others do. Like, some people see things as a much bigger deal than others. There's a lot of different types of that guys, right? I had a player who was just didn't want to understand how to learn how to play the game, didn't take their time learning how to play, and it didn't really affect too much. It was a home game, but the way we handled it was we knew the campaign was going to end in 3 weeks, and we just decided not to do anything about it. It wasn't a big enough deal.
Wow.
Yeah. I feel like the largest thing that we can stress about Planar Marches in this case is that if you do have a problem, it's just please let one of us know in the helpers or mods.
Telehelp.
If you're not comfortable with like stopping the session and being like, no, seriously, I'm not cool with this, then please let a helper or a mod know, and we will get right on that. Basically, that's one of our pride and joys, is that we are actually too helpful. And if you let us know, we're on it like fucking hound dogs.
If
So
you are a DM, be mindful that you are taking a degree of responsibility by DMing, right? Like, you need to know how to diffuse a player if they're taking certain things too far. And if you're not comfortable about that as a DM, we don't, DMs, no one's asking you to become a communications expert. But again, like Evie said, bring it up to a helper, and they'll be on it. There is a big difference between harassment and annoyance. Sometimes you just get annoyed by players. That type of that guy situation is usually more of a personal one, right? Mm-hmm. Like, man, that guy just really, he just interrupts everything I say. It's not against the rules. They're just an annoying person, right? In that case, I just think you don't worry about it too much. Understand that's going to happen. Maybe try to avoid them in the future. But like I said, people have different tolerances.
We've got like 200 something people. If someone's causing issues in the game, just don't join a game with them.
Some people just won't get along, like me and Crook.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I will never play in a Gavin game, ever. But
No, that guy's horrible. Doesn't know how to DM anything.
hate Gavin.
Always makes dwarves with the same accent. Every dwarf has the same accent to him. That
All dwarves are the
racist.
same person.
To at the time.
That
What kind of a name is Gavin anyway?
right?
Yeah.
Fucking that guy. Yeah.
Cosbones ask, "What's the weirdest genre shift during a session you played in or DM'd?" I'm not sure I'm not sure what type of genre shift you're asking about. Like, furthest away from traditional D&D or mid-session genre shift. But we can answer either. What depending on which one. What do you guys think?
I have a one for mid-session genre shift, but this is one that I kind of did on purpose. Was during a session, I had the players go out and do a job for this person who was sort of just like this omnipotent raven woman, and typically like the whole scenery was just like, oh yeah, she lives in this really like shady place, and it's got like a black fence, and all the stuff is like really weird and decrepit looking. Inside is all neat, and she's got like all this ominous looking shit and whatever. Turns out she's just a really chill lady who really likes her coworkers and wishes the best for them. And it's like, yeah, I need you to go find this guy because he's a fucking idiot and got himself stuck with like the mob or something. So go please help him out so he doesn't hurt himself and also his daughter and stuff. And like it started off as a very like, oh, we're doing shady shit for shady people, to a like, oh, I'm just helping someone out. I feel really good about this. Thanks. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, that kind of works.
Cyber, weirdest genre shift during a session you've played in or DM'd, or I mean, if you've done like a general roleplay session, like a scene.
Oh man.
I'm gonna throw back to the Cortex stuff that I mentioned earlier.
So for those of you who don't know, give us like a quick 30-second explanation of what Cortex is.
Okay, basically, you pick any setup of things from the whole StarCraft game. You rename them, you give them their own abilities. You basically play them as a character, do whatever the fuck you want with an open group of people. 99.999% of the time, it turns out to be a total mess. Given this was like 4 or 5 years ago, I cannot remember
not to
any
demean it.
specific thing with detail.
Not to demean it,
But-
it is almost as if you're just playing with action figures in the StarCraft engine.
Basically, that's exactly what it
Wow.
is.
I can't really describe it any other way, right?
Yeah, I don't have anything specific that I can recall off the top of my head, but when you've got, 12 people with vastly different ideas of what they all want RP, of vastly different characters,
And
vastly
grammar
different
levels.
settings, and you throw all that shit together. Oh my god, some of the
You don't even have a genre shift at that point. You're just trying to figure out what the genre is to
it's
begin
not
with.
it's not even a genre shift. I mean, sometimes you had ones where it had one thing. Oh, this is the general sort of deal that everyone's going for, and then you got some 8-year-old kid with OC Raven Steel, do not steal, donut character, teleports behind you, nothing personnel kid kind of. It just turns into a train wreck. Some of the things were very frustrating. Some of them, it's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You just want to get out.
But you can't look away.
Yeah.
What Okay, Evie.
Mhm.
Weirdest genre shift.
Weirdest genre shift. I personally, as a DM, I feel like I'm really comfortable with making this scene and then setting it up, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I'm actually into this," and then kind of like flipping the switch, just kind of on at the very last moment, and people are like, "Wait, what? Wait, what happened?" The largest, I guess, example of that being when I did my game on Planar Marches, the menagerie. It was all of these cute little animals wearing cute little top hats and nice little vests and little fancy clothes, and then everybody was like, "Oh no, they're gonna eat us! They're gonna eat us!" And I was like, "No, it's cool. Everything's cool. Everything's fine. They're just leading you where you need to go." And at the end, they did in fact try to eat them. And like one member of the party was like, "I fucking told you so," and was like, "Yeah, yeah." So it's basically just being like, "Oh, you're safe," and then be like, "Ha! No, you're not." That's always fun.
Yeah.
My genre shift story. This is about as traditional as it gets because this was during the home campaign. If you've watched The Legend of Korra, like my DM had, and had made their world be very similar to The Legend of Korra, it's
Nice.
basically not steampunk. It's like a level right next to steampunk, where it's a miniature industrial revolution, and our characters had really just like awoken from the past into that new world, whatever. So the entire campaign was based around, your characters from an older time discovering and unraveling plots around the fact that you're in this new world, steam-powered engines, guns, neon lights, all this cool stuff. And then we went to chase the Empress, the evil Empress, all of that stuff. And we entered a castle, and we suddenly found ourselves in the Shadowfell. So we went from a somewhat whimsical adventure exploration, discovering things new, to a horror sort of themed Shadowfell castle Shadow Dragon ending. And I don't really think our DM really planned on it to be such a sudden genre shift from whimsy to horror, but they had decided that they were bored with the campaign, and it had been about 6 months, and decided, you know what, let's go ahead and end it at 6 months 1 week, so let's go ahead and rush to our final boss. So which, to be fair, that's a good thing, because we actually finished the campaign, which, that's an achievement in of itself.
Yeah.
Don't really care how fast it ended. We went for longer than 6 months, and we won. So,
Fucking some
Nice.
campaigns don't even start.
Yep.
unlike Devils of Sigil, which will start, hosted by Ave, Evie, and
Yeah.
Crook. And with that, we are going to call it an end to this episode of the Planar Podcast. But first, I'd like to give everyone a chance to give out any shout-outs they want. I'd like to thank the guests, the audience. You guys are really what keeps us going, keeps the show going, your interest. Thank you to everyone who helps keep the server running. Evie, any shout outs you'd like to give?
Shout out to the gays. We have a lot of them.
So
we have a lot of them.
We got a suggestion that we should definitely note the fact that we are a very diverse server. We're very welcoming. We want everyone to have fun. Evie definitely took that message to heart. Continue.
We're very LGBTQ plus friendly. There's a lot of just different diversities and different pronouns and everything on the server, and we're usually pretty respectful about that. And we're welcoming of all of those various types of people, as pretty much just being as welcome as we can. But yeah, shout out to all the gays.
Crook.
As always, shout outs to Tooth.
Shout outs to Tooth.
Shout outs to my mom's. Shout outs to this garage.
Nice garage.
And yeah.
Side
Yeah,
beer.
and thank you guys as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the Academy for having me here today.
Yes.
But honestly, thanks to you three for having me here, especially with the current flavor topic. Of all things considered, I mean, it's always kind of well suited to that whole debate.
Yeah.
Generally, to the whole server, this has actually been pretty neat as my first real. Well, not quite my first. There's a kind of thing that I've done with a few other people, but didn't really get very far.
Your first
so far.
real one.
But my
It's Oz.
first real setup with like an actual character that I wrote shit for so far as 5e
yeah.
goes. Been pretty neat, especially given, again, all the freedoms and everything afforded by the whole setting of Sigil, which is really fucking awesome. I had an idea that I was going to use coming in here, and as soon as I heard that, hey, you could actually have a lot of different things, that went out the window, because let's do what I can do now, make everyone's crazy favorite crazy uncle. Yeah, and also shout out to Dova.
Hey.
Oh yeah, nut.
Nut.
I mean, that's my line, but all right.
Oh, well, all right. Listen, you can't tell me what I can and can't do on the weekends with Dova.
Oh no.
You're right. I probably can't.
I'll give my shout outs first to my boy Sinosure. Always give a shout out to that dude. He is easily.
Hope you're enjoying your vacation.
Exactly. He's not even gonna watch this later. But shout outs to Rhino Sinosure. He has always been a help to the stream. I know if he was here right now, he'd be basically every other message, taking notes for me, stuff like that. So shout outs to him. He's definitely what keeps my stream and my sanity running. Shout outs to the few of my mods who only watch me for video games, who joined the podcast not knowing I was doing this and have no clue what's going on right now. And again, thank you to you, Cybeer. Thank you to Crook and Evie, my hosts. Want to make some very quick programming notes for the channel itself before we close. Again, guys, especially because of this podcast, and you guys have been amazing to me. We got a sub button 2 days ago, which is awesome. So if you have, not to be a shill, but if you so happen to have Amazon Prime, and therefore Twitch Prime, and realize you might not be using your free sub of the month, boy, do I have a place for you to use it. But no, regardless, for real, thank you guys so much for following, for subbing. I'm doing an appreciation stream, and everyone here is invited. Saturday, that's Eastern. So that is this Saturday. The stream starts at 11 p.m. and 1 hour later, at midnight, we're doing a game giveaway. So that is for followers. I'm not even advertising outside of stream. I'm going to whisper all of my followers and say, hey, I'm trying to keep this on the down low because I don't want a bunch of people to join in and say, I've been following, I've been your biggest fan. No, I want you guys who have been following to have an exclusive stream for you guys to have a chance to win a game, $60 plus tax or whatever. So if you're following, be there for that. Also use the code Gavin for a free book on Audible. Yep, that's true.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yep, that going.
Is that a legit?
No.
All right, I was just checking. I was
Oh
like,
man,
yo.
dude, Audible's the shit. Why you gotta troll me like that?
But thank you
Listen.
so much, guys, for that. Stay tuned. Next stream Saturday. Next episode of Planar Podcast. Usually Thursdays. We'll get the exact date for sure to the server by Monday or Tuesday. Hope you guys are excited for the next episode. And I think that's just about it. So thank you very much, guys. Any final words from anybody?
I love you.
I was naked this whole time.
Nice.
None of us are surprised.
Can you fax me your nude, please? Thank you.
No problem.
Who the hell uses a fax machine in this year, 2018?
I use it for all my nudes and all of my
She likes to...
when people send me food.
yeah, send
I
food-
request
food
they
and
fax
nude.
it.
I